Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Water, it should go without saying, means a lot to us here. I can't think of many places in the States, at least, where we define ourselves by a feature, by the idea of the Bay. I'm from East Bay. I'm from North Bay. I just moved to South Bay. That would be a lucky person, right? You can afford that. So today, when we were picking our speaker, we could think of no better person than Sejal Choksi-Chugh, who is the executive director of Baykeeper. Baykeeper is an organization that's been around for 30 years protecting this vital resource, the San Francisco Bay, and all of the estuaries that flow into it. Everyone, please give a very warm Oakland welcome to Sejal Choksi-Chugh.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. When Daniel first asked me to speak today, he said, "Do you think your talk could touch on the topic of water?" And I totally laughed because I don't think I could talk for 15 or 20 minutes without talking about water. It's kind of one of the hazards of being an executive director of Baykeeper. Water's always on the mind, water issues, always thinking about them. So I was happy to say yes, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm actually really glad that all of you guys are here. You know, it's really easy on a Friday morning to just snooze your alarm, and it's gorgeous outside. You could have taken a walk. Instead, you guys chose to be here. You chose to be curious about what I was going to talk about. You decided that you really wanted to expand your perspectives and think creatively and get engaged. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate you guys being here. Baykeeper's office is in Oakland. We're an Oakland-based organization, very close by to this office, actually, just a few blocks away. But I actually grew up, born and raised in Atlanta, right outside of Atlanta. And I was the daughter of immigrants from India. They came to this country with advanced degrees in engineering and chemistry, and they had $20 in their pocket and lots of big dreams. They worked really hard. They loved me and my brother to pieces. Sometimes it felt like maybe that love was contingent on us bringing good grades home from school. We were really required to succeed and take advantage of the opportunities that they were giving us. So I was also a daughter of the Georgia public school system. Interesting school system, definitely kind of a drill and kill system where it's more about the testing than the teaching, and not really forcing you to think critically. So that goes to say I had a lot of fun in high school. And it was not too hard to meet my parents' expectations, which was good. And one other thing about my high school is that it was really surprisingly diverse. We had over 48 different languages spoken just in my high school, and more faces that looked like mine than definitely other places of the Deep South. So that was a really interesting experience, having gone to that high school. And I think about it now, and I realize that that diversity brought along with it something else. In our neighborhood, it was also a very diverse neighborhood, obviously, we had a creek running through it. And on the bank of that creek, in the middle of this residential neighborhood, next to our school, sat a big cement facility. It was an ugly eyesore that the company actually tried to hide behind these big, tall, evergreen trees. But we all knew it was there. We could, on most days, see the tops of equipment that was kind of moving around the site. We could hear the crunching of the heavy machinery on all of the gravel. And we could hear the noise of the trucks changing gears as they were shifting. And the other thing that we noticed every day when we walked out of our school building was that there was yellow dust all over all the cars, all over the pavement, all over the windowsills, on the school grounds where we were running, and on that creek that was nearby. So growing up, that always felt in the back of my mind that made me angry. I was always wondering, why is that company allowed to be there exposing all of us kids to who knows what? And for a few hot moments when I was a disgruntled teenager, I actually posed that question to my teachers, my parents, my neighbors. I said, why is that company allowed to be right here in our neighborhood? Why can't we do anything to stop them? And disappointingly, most of the time, the answer was, that's just the way it is. And that was really disappointing for me. My parents were really busy. They had very long work hours. They weren't involved in community meetings or PTA meetings. And way back then, in the early 90s, there wasn't social media. So it wasn't like I could go online and send emails and find like-minded people who were outraged as well. I couldn't cause a viral stink about it. So I kind of learned to bury that anger and not think too critically, like my school system had taught me, and to really just keep having fun and study for the SATs. But that experience actually is what brought me to the Bay Area for law school. So when I got to the Bay Area about 21 years ago, I was a transplant, and I saw the Bay for the first time. How many of you guys remember the first time you saw San Francisco Bay? Yeah. If you guys could just turn to yourselves for a second, talk to each other about kind of one of your first impressions of the Bay. Even if you were a baby, when you were a little bit older and you saw the Bay for the first time, or you experienced the Bay for the first time. Can you just talk for a second about what you thought of when you saw the Bay? So it sounds like you guys had a lot to talk about. You had a lot to talk about when you wanted to talk about your first impressions of the Bay. That's amazing. Can I get a show of hands real quick? For those of you who had remembered your experiences of the Bay, who here had something about the beauty or the wildlife or something just about how nice it was, how big it was, how pretty it was? All right, a lot of people, pretty much everyone. So that was my first experience too. We're gonna come back to that in a second. But that was my first experience too. I saw the Bay. I was standing at the top of a lookout point. 1998. It was a clear day. And, I could see Oakland and Berkeley and San Francisco. And then I could see the Bay. And it was this beautiful, shimmery, kind of not really a blue. It's like a greenish, grayish, bluish, moody thing. It's not really blue. And, I realized at that moment that I had never seen an expansive water body like that except when I was on vacation with my family because I was in landlocked Atlanta. So I saw that and it just inspired me for a moment because I said, wow, this is my new home, at least for law school, and this huge, expansive, exotic waterway is right here. And at that moment, I didn't realize that a little seed was being planted. And I definitely didn't realize that I was going to later dedicate my life to protecting that bay. So it was kind of a nice moment. And then a few years later, after law school, a number of years later, I actually was able to experience the bay in a really different way. I was on the Baykeeper boat. Yes, Baykeeper has a boat. And it's a really cool, exciting part of my job that I'm required, it's in my job description, to go out on patrol and be on the water and looking at the shoreline. So I was out on patrol, and it was a really clear, sunny day, and there was a slight breeze in the air, and it got amplified as we were zipping across the water, the choppy water. And we were heading towards this industrial part of the shoreline. It's a place where there are really large cranes and conveyors, and they're kind of looming over the water, over the side. And there are signs up on all of the piers that say, don't fish here because the fish are too toxic to eat. So we neared our destination, and the skipper kind of pulled our boat to a halt slowly, and we were kind of sitting there bobbing in the waves of the water, and we were staring at this facility right in front of us. And it's an industrial facility that we had seen a number of times on other patrols, but on that day, there was a huge pile, dark black pile of coal sitting right on the dock. It was about 4 stories high and probably wider than this room. And we just stared at it, and there was kind of this eerie silence as we were looking at it, and felt kind of ominous because it looked like at any moment the coal could just like tumble onto us. And then all of a sudden, the breeze picked up, and off the top of the pile, the coal went directly into the water. So that's when we knew we had a problem. And we realized that those toxic fish under our boat were saying, hey, can you guys please stop this polluter? So that's when Baykeeper kicked into action. Our scientists took water samples and analyzed them right near the facility. Back at the office, our attorneys researched the facility, got lots of background information, and looked at their own environmental compliance reports. And then, with multiple silver bullets in our pocket, we sued that company. And they didn't even see us coming. The regulatory agency had been turning a blind eye to this company for decades. So when we sued the company, they fought us tooth and nail. They hired high-priced attorneys. They said, what are you talking about? The Clean Water Act doesn't even apply to us. We don't have to comply with that law. They called our lawsuits frivolous. They threw legal motions at our attorneys. We were fighting them for years. And I suspect that they actually wanted to put us out of business. They were part of an industry, and they knew that they would kind of be heroes of that industry if they were able to say, hey, we got rid of those pesky environmentalists at Baykeeper. They're no longer operating because we put them out of business. And they actually almost succeeded. I hate to admit that. I hate to put that on video. But they actually did almost succeed because they fought us tooth and nail. But we started hearing from the community. We started hearing from people who were seeing coal dust on their cars and their windowsills and on their pavements and their playgrounds. And we started hearing stories of kids who were having breathing problems. And that's actually the moment that I realized that my little brother's chronic asthma was probably the result of all of that yellow dust that was around us all the time. But this time, there was actually something that I could do about it. So we fought them back, we kept fighting, and we won. We had the scientific data to back us up, we had the legal know-how, we had we had smoking gun of their own environmental reports saying that they had pollution problems at the site. And so we forced that company to spend over $1 million to fix their pollution, to get it from not going directly into the bay. And they did that. Over 3 years, they actually are now in compliance. They have reduced the water pollution coming off of their site by 98%. That means less arsenic, less lead, what else is in coal? All this dirty stuff, selenium, all these really toxic things. None of that is getting in the water anymore, which helped me and the community feel really empowered. So it was just a great moment. But I did want to ask, I'm going to play a quick game here. How many of these kinds of industrial facilities are around San Francisco Bay? Do you guys, anybody want to take a guess? 127. 500. 350. Whoa, that was really close. Tiffany gets the prize. We have more than 1,640 industrial facilities that discharge to the waters of San Francisco Bay. Those are all facilities that discharge heavy metals and that Baykeeper has on a very long watch list. So we are paying attention to them. Let's see what else. How many oil refineries do we have? This one's kind of easier, maybe. No? 3? 5. Who said 5? All right, you get the prize. We have 5 oil refineries on San Francisco Bay, directly on the water. How many wastewater treatment plants do we have? 40. Close, who said 40? All right, 40. It's between 37 and 42, depending on if you count the ocean side ones. Yeah. How many cities have stormwater systems that discharge to San Francisco Bay? Directly. 88. 88. Who said 88? 86. Yeah. Victor. We're estimating. How many oil tankers, cargo ships, vessels, boats of any kind, how many of those do you think kind of go across the bay every day? Between 380 and 400 a day. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, now this one's really, really tricky. Okay. How many historically contaminated lands do we have around the bay that will be inundated in 50 to 100 years by the projected sea level rise in San Francisco Bay? It's 1,147 approximately. So that just kind of show how urban the Bay actually is. The Bay is really urban. And that's interesting because when we think about our first impressions of the Bay, when we think about, what the Bay means to us, that's not really the stuff we talk about. We don't talk about the Bay's urbanness. We don't talk about the Bay's pollutedness. But the Bay is actually one of the world's most urban estuaries. It starts at the Oregon border, and it's about 60,000 square miles of water that flows down into the Delta via the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers, and that water flows out through the bay under our iconic Golden Gate Bridge. And that water is majestic, it's ecologically significant, and it's under threat every single day, which is why Baykeeper exists. So Baykeeper has been fighting some of these big threats. We identify the biggest threats and defend the bay from them. And one of the reasons that I've been at Baykeeper for 17 years, not at the helm the whole time. I started off as a little fellow, not really knowing what I was doing. I've been there so long because there is so much to do. There is, and it's such an effective organization. It's one of the nimblest organizations around, and that's because we have 4 core kind of focus areas of expertise where we are investigating pollution, and that's through our boat patrols, drone patrols. We have drones that go out to look for pollution. We have a pollution hotline that people can call to learn or to tell us so that we can learn more about what's happening because we can't be everywhere. And we have field investigators that are out in the field looking for pollution and following up on the pollution hotline calls. We also stop polluters. We stop polluters. We have attorneys on staff, and we are looking to hold companies accountable to the laws that exist that are supposed to protect all of us in our waters. We also strengthen laws because oftentimes the laws are too weak. They've been negotiated with the regulated entities. And then we also know that the Bay will be able to withstand some of these threats if it's stronger. So we work on protecting the sand and the sediment and the wetlands of the bay. So that photo that Daniel had up earlier, where he called it coffee, that brown discoloration, is actually sediment that comes in whenever it rains, comes in from the delta. And it's actually a good thing. We get a lot of pollution hotline calls about that sediment, saying, oh my gosh, there's something in the water. It's a big sewage spill. But no, that's actually sediment, and it's good for the bay. It's healthy for the bay. So Baykeeper has actually been working for 30 years to help keep the bay more resilient. We have our four attorneys and 3 scientists have held more than 277 industrial facilities accountable for their pollution. That means less heavy metals and toxic chemicals getting into the bay. We've helped reduce sewage spills by 75% from 10 different cities, meaning the swimmers that are brave enough to get in the water are safer every time it rains. We've sued oil companies and challenged them and told them they can't expand here, and we've won those cases. We've sued Dow Chemical and said, you know what, you got to stop dumping those toxic chemicals in the bay, and they had to stop. And we've helped strengthen the laws to keep mercury and selenium out of the bay. In fact, our regional agency recently, not that recently, I guess, 2006-ish, said, hey, you know what, mercury is a really toxic problem in the bay. We're going to spend some time and really effectively reduce the mercury problem in the bay by identifying all the sources and reducing that point source by point source. And they said, yeah, and we're going to give it 120 years. That's our plan. 120 years. And the action in that plan is that all that contaminated sediment, all those discharges of mercury, they're just going to flow out under the Golden Gate Bridge and naturally attenuate. And then our bay will be clean, because that's the way science works. And when I read that, I said, yeah, right, that's not an action plan. So we challenged that. We got it to be stronger. They had to actually identify all of the sources and ratchet them down over the next 20 years, which is much better than 120. So we've strengthened those kinds of laws. And we've also helped create more resilience in the bay. So a lot of people don't know that there are 2 companies that are taking too much sand out of San Francisco Bay. This is the same sand that goes out under the Golden Gate Bridge and settles down on Ocean Beach. As you may know, Ocean Beach is experiencing severe erosion problems. Not surprised, a lot of the scientists are showing that that same amount of sand that is taken out of the bay is approximately equivalent to the amount of sand that's missing from Ocean Beach. So a few years ago, the State Lands Commission, California agency, decided, hey, you know what? The miners are actually asking for a doubling. They want to increase the amount of sand they're taking. The sand is used for concrete and cement and construction. And the state land said, all right, sounds good to us. Let's rubber stamp that permit. So our scientists just happened to be in the hearing room that day and caught that and said, that doesn't sound right. And so he put our attorneys on it, and just last month, we ended up winning a case at the first time in the country where the court said that sand belongs to the public and needs to be protected. Pretty cool. So that's why I've been a baykeeper so long, because it does amazing work. And I am actually really happy to say that just 2 weeks ago, we signed a settlement with the very same multinational corporation that operated near my school in Atlanta. They had a similar facility here in a Bay Area neighborhood, and we held them accountable and said, you can't do that. So I kind of felt a little bit vindicated for my childhood and my family. And I know that Baykeeper is going to continue holding polluters accountable and strengthening laws to make sure the Bay Area and local communities are protected, are healthier, safer, and stronger. So, thank you.